Good morning, welcome to SHOWstudio. It's a happy day because it's the student panel, and everybody knows it's one of my favorite panels. Last show of Men's Week in Paris, Autumn-Winter 19, was Celine last night, one of the most awaited show of the season by Hedi Slimane, the first menswear Celine show. And it's our last menswear panel for the season. So with no further ado, I would like my lovely students to introduce themselves, starting from you, Boy.
Hi, I'm Boy Kloves. I study fashion design with marketing at Central St. Martin's. Yeah.
I'm Christine Ha. I'm a second-year BA fashion design student at the University of Westminster.
Hey, I'm Ruth Thomas. I'm an editorial intern here at SHOWstudio, but previously I studied at the University of Western Australia, law and music.
I'm Joshua James Small. I'm a women's wear design student at the University for the Creative Arts, Epsom.
And as you can hear from the accents, we have a very international panel with two American and Australian, and I guess
British.
a Brit. So, Hedi showed Hedi last night with not many surprises, but some surprises. And for me, the first was that it was very desirable. So he, at least as far as I'm concerned, he didn't push anybody away. He wasn't throwing it in your face. He did Hedi Slimane, which I respect because I like people to have a signature, but he also gave some very desirable pieces of tailoring, of modern tailoring. Was it incredibly creative to the point that it was changing and reinventing the wheel? No, I don't think so. But was Paris that? No. So it's the return of tailoring, it's this take of modern tailoring, and we saw it here as well. One thing I want to say before giving it to you all, Hedi wrote, I guess, his own press release. And I was discussing this morning in the office and with you guys. I thought it was probably the only press release of the season that I understood. So I don't know if it's because he wrote it himself, or it's in the I person, or it's because it's not full of blah, 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 but I got it, and I got what he wanted to say, and I can see it actually in the show. And one thing I liked particularly was how he explained how he chose the music. So the whole show goes on, if you watch the video, with this Canadian group called Clouds, I knew I would forget it, Crack Cloud, sorry, I didn't know it, but it's called Crack Cloud, and they're Canadian. And then it was the finale, when all the model came out, there was this saxophonist from the 70s called James Chance, who was on this circle. He was playing alone his sax, and it was very, I think, poetic, even if his playing is not classic, but it was very poetic, and it reminded me of a saxophonist player that I saw once, many years ago, in Burning Man, deep into the playa, turning around alone with people around watching, you know. So, all in all, I liked the show. All in all, I was surprised and not very surprised, and I think there is a lot to say, so I'm going to give you the floor. Who wants to start?
I feel like going into the show, I didn't have much expectation beyond what everybody has been saying, which is that Hedi does Hedi. I think we talked about this a bit before we went into filming, but LVMH has kind of set the stage to say that they have financial expectations to triple their business with Hedi in the next 5 years. And
2 billion. They want to get to a 2 billion brand.
And I think if you were to give him a brief to say, right, Hedi, go do 70s Carnaby Street mods, I mean, I think it's very clear that that's what he's produced. And while it might not be creative, it ticks off the boxes for LVMH, I think. And so I think it's not a surprise, but I don't think...
I don't think they gave him the brief to do mods. I think that comes from him. But I see what you mean.
But just coming from, as a student,
like
being
go
in
out
course,
and make
if someone
money.
were to say if this was, you know, your inspiration, it's very clear that that's what's been produced. And so, yeah, no surprises. But I felt generally underwhelmed in the context of all the other amazing menswear that we've seen this season.
Okay. I'll get back to that.
I think it's quite interesting though, because LVMH have had like a lot of new people launching their brands, like Beluti, Dior, they've all got new designers showing their first like major collections.
So Kim, Chris,
Yeah.
JW Anderson, Loewe,
Yeah. And
Chris, they all compete with each other
and they're all
within the same group.
within Loewe, but I mean within LVMH. But I feel like his customer that Eddie's like proposing is quite different to the customers for Berluti and Dior, because I was actually thinking those are quite similar, but this is like a much different man, I think, who would be buying this. I don't think the person buying this would be going anywhere near Dior. Do you know what I mean?
It's very different, you're right.
I think it's good that it's a very distinct look.
What do the men in the panel think?
I wonder almost, because I found myself quite underwhelmed as well. And I think that the thing that I wonder is that, does this customer exist anymore? Because I think this is quintessential 80. I think it's amazing. I think I really appreciate what he does, but I don't know if it's pushing it to a modern customer. I don't know if this is something that is contemporary fashion anymore. I do think it's very saleable. I think it makes sense with what LVMH wants to do, but I'm not sure if this is the most fashion-forward collection that we could be seeing.
Do we expect that from Celine? Not from Hedi, from the brand.
I do. I think Phoebe Philo really, I think, pushed it beyond that we should be expecting kind of surprise. We should be expecting something interesting, something new. And I think that with him, I think we're seeing kind of similar things to what he's been doing, and I don't see much difference from the menswear that we saw introduced in the women's wear collection a few months ago.
I actually feel like there are quite a few new silhouettes though in this collection. Like the cut of the trouser, especially in some of the looks, was much higher on the waist.
Yeah, when that first look came out, I was like,
They were
oh,
really
Yeah.
subtle though.
And
The
then
hems of the
those-
trousers, the square shoulder of the jacket that started with the
Yeah.
women. That's very Celine by Hedi Slimane. But let's listen to.
I didn't dislike it entirely. I didn't dislike it entirely, but I didn't think it was anything new. And it's obviously in direct competition to Saint Laurent, but I don't see the point in that, because I don't see the point in having two of the same thing, because the customer already exists and is already buying from Saint Laurent, so why would they move to Celine?
Do you see this in competition with Yves Saint Laurent men?
Still, yeah, still. I think it's less so this season, but I still think it's there, and I don't think there's anything drastically new. And I think there was so much potential with Celine, especially when you think about how much you could translate from the women's wear into the men's wear. I think there was so much opportunity, and it's kind of like, it looks a bit like it could be 2008. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It could.
I agree.
I feel like the collection could be 2008, and especially when like menswear is meant to like surpass women's wear in becoming more. It's supposed to sell more in 2022 than women's wear. It's meant to be a bigger market share.
It's already
yeah.
going faster.
So why there's so much potential for there's new stuff. I just don't see the point in
Okay,
making.
but let me put it like this. It's
same.
obvious that Hedi Slimane, if you follow this career from Saint Laurent men before Dior, is very focused. He has a very strict point of view, which I think is good, and that's why he's Hedi Slimane, and he's hated or loved, but he's respected. So he has a very strict point of view. He sells clothes because he turned around Dior at the time, and he changed the way men's were wearing. He created a certain silhouette. He did really well at Saint Laurent. The figures talk, okay? And now, of course, as Ruth was saying, or I don't remember which one of you was saying, LVMH obviously hired him for that as well. So these are the facts. Then I'm talking to very young people, and I'm wondering, if you think that this is nothing new for a young person, so who is he catering to? Or who I mean, he has a big fan club that will wear whatever
If they were a graduate, would they get that much press for that collection? Like, think about it like that, because obviously you scrutinise a graduate based on that, because you want something new. So why don't you scrutinise an existing designer by the same standards? And if that was to be a new designer, would you be dying to go and see that show, or would you surpass it? And I think
but you,
would
like in
surpass
art, you're allowed to do a monochrome painting when you've shown
Kind of,
you
but I
are
think why
first,
doesn't
you
he
know
just
what I
set
mean?
up his own, do you know what I mean? Why doesn't he set up his own brand and do that? Because he's got such a focused aesthetic, which he's done consistently throughout multiple different brands now.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he doesn't just do his own brand and let other brands have their own place and story. Because obviously Celine didn't have menswear beforehand, and now the history of menswear at Celine is not Celine really, it's Heidi.
I think to answer your question about who the customer that he is catering to, I think that we're at this point in fashion where luxury is kind of redefining itself. It's either going towards something that can appeal to a mass market, which I think is what this is. I mean, obviously not everyone can purchase this, but I think it's something that's much more palatable for someone that's fashionable, but not necessarily in fashion. I think because we're all in fashion, we're craving something insane. We're craving something big and new shapes, and yeah, we want Charles Jeffrey, we want Craig Green, we want all these kind of big shapes. I think we all have a soft spot for Raf, even though we know that didn't really work out. But I think what you realize is that I think LVMH and these parent companies are realizing there's ways that we can cater to a bigger clientele, a bigger customer base. And I think that this is what he's doing. And I think it is a question that we have to ask, is that something that we really want fashion to be? Is it something that is, it's interesting because I feel like it's a balance between art and commerce. And I think right now what you see is a lot of parent companies are leaning towards commerce rather than art. Which I think is
that's
kind of
not only Hedi Slimane, that's been the trend. I mean, Paris, apart maybe from Dior, that I thought was extraordinary, but that would be another panel, unfortunately. But I mean, Paris has given us, and Milan, they've given us this. Probably only London has given you some new shapes and creativity. No, am I wrong?
But did London get more press? Like, that's probably a best way of like working out whether it was
more
like,
praise. You say the price.
Press. Like, do you know what I mean? Were more people interested in London than they were Paris and Milan? I don't know whether there's a way to quantify that,
I think
but
it depends on
that would be one way of
audience
working out whether people are actually interested in something new or whether people are interested in something commercial.
Well, depending who people are.
Partially, the reason why we feel so underwhelmed is because we started with London, where you have Charles Jeffrey, for example, who is this amazing storyteller and has this very beautiful vision and is able to execute that in a almost like bigger than life way, where it's almost theatrical, where he's brought in, you know, a choreographer, somebody to do the set design. He had 3 collaborators this season, Matthew Needham, Luke Smith, and Leo Carlton, who did the pieces for the show. And I think he was able to do what I think fashion design at its best does, which is to make clothes that are compelling, but also to give the audience a vision, a greater story, and something more to aspire to than just the clothing, a world, exactly. And he kind of set the stage with a cast of characters, and I think that's kind of the thing that I do fashion for, really, is to be a part of something that really moves you.
You mean like the theatrics, kind of?
Partially the theatrics, and I think in that
very
sense,
British tradition. I mean, think McQueen, Galliano.
Yeah, and I think we haven't really seen that very much, and I think that's what the young design scene in London is bringing at the moment. And so for him to kind of draw on inspiration in London, I think he has.
And yet, if you think Craig Green, who I think is still one of the greatest men's designers of the new generation, his atmosphere, and I was there, is given more by the light and the music. And usually when I go to a Craig show, for me it's the most emotional. And then I will look at the clothes with a different eye. And I think what Hedi does is more that. It doesn't need, I mean, this was an incredible glass house in the middle of Place de la Concorde, so it wasn't really nothing with the traffic around. But I mean, the set and the music and the light, that's what for him is the spectacle.
Yeah.
But maybe it doesn't touch your heart as much as
also,
Charles.
I think Charles, for example, he brought in the queer community, and he had a lot of young people that he was representing, and I guess
that's who he is.
That's who he is.
So I think they all are someone different, and Charles was one of the best shows of the whole season for sure. Yet even he went a tiny bit more commercial, because at the end of the day, if you don't sell your stuff.
His stuff wasn't selling that well, was it, beforehand? Like, his way of, like, the stuff that he makes on the catwalk translated into marketable product is slightly different. Do you know, a bit like McQueen or that sort of thing, you know, when they used to create overt things that wouldn't translate into something that would sell.
If you don't translate into sales at all, then
yeah, which makes sense. So it makes sense.
You don't exist anymore.
Yeah, so it makes sense that he's transitioned into doing that. But
so I guess on the one hand, you have like LVMH, who wants these sales and numbers, and then you have younger designers that are kind of getting into that creative thing. And maybe there's a balance between.
But I feel like it's so unfair to say Hedi Slimane's collection is like just being commercial. I feel like he did introduce new elements, and he's working within a different aesthetic. Like, although it's inspired by aspects of London, it's not trying to imitate or pretend to be the new creative London designer. I think his audience is really like the musician, and like, cause he's dressed like David Bowie, he dressed like he photographed Lady Gaga's like cover of like her album and stuff. So I feel like he isn't really trying to speak to the fashion world, and the fashion world doesn't particularly sometimes want to engage with him on his terms. So I think he's almost bypassed like fashion criticism, and he's just speaking directly to what he thinks is his customer. But I think he has introduced new shapes here, and although there are like similarities between like this and what Saint Laurent is doing, when you put them side by side, his ones are actually like much better. Like the cut's nicer, the ideas are fresher. In comparison, Saint Laurent almost looks costumey sometimes.
And Saint Laurent looks Hedi Slimane, sorry.
Yeah.
That's very true. I think for me personally, the thing is like, I think for a house as big as Celine, like you can obviously have pieces that exist on runway that don't go into the stores. And I think I was just hoping for something that was Hedi, but kind of like just pushed even further. Just the slim suit, but even like it was just insanely slim. It was these kind of crazy shapes or these jackets that we know and expect from him, but just more. And I think it's very subtle what we're seeing here. And I think
But that's kind of a code of Celine, especially after Phoebe Philo, is like for subtlety to be there. Like you don't want to have something which is like a total change in aesthetic. You want to be like developing those codes through the seasons. There was like a look right towards the bottom where the guy is wearing like a leather jacket underneath a coat. And I feel like you introduced like that one right there.
Yeah. Can we go through the collection? Because I think it would be easier to, can we go from look number one, maybe put it bigger for us? Because I agree with Ruth that there are some new shapes and new ideas for Hedi more than for fashion in general. I mean, we're talking tailoring here. But I would like to have the take of everybody on this. So of course he started with the typical black, all black look. I'm not a fan of the slim necktie.
But I think about that. They were saying.
But I think, hold on. But I think the slim necktie is what is going to bring people into the store.
Yeah, because they said that it was like this article, and it said that millennials haven't got a slim necktie. They haven't bought into that crate because obviously it was like 10 years ago.
But they can buy it.
Yeah, so now they can buy into it. But then I was thinking, do they actually want? I don't think that.
Well, I don't know. I'm asking. I'm wondering.
I wouldn't.
You know, if Hedi says, maybe people won't.
I feel like that was a little bit of a thing when Mad Men came out, like maybe about like. Like Mad Men came out, like the TV show.
Yeah, but it was in the 1960s. The story of, Mad Men, it was...
Yeah, but I feel like there was a bit of a revival. I remember some of my friends had like those skinny ties and started wearing like blue suits and stuff. But I feel like earlier in the collection there was a look which was like a blue suit, which was really nice. So.
It is a nice collection, but it's just nothing...
I think the zebra coat with
I feel like,
yellow is really interesting.
And I feel like the longer you look at a piece, the more you start to look at like the details and what he has done to change it.
I do think that's
like
something
he's
that
wearing
you
a
miss.
leather tie there, it looks almost...
I think he operates within subtlety. I don't think we can say he's a minimalist, but I think he's just very much his own self, and he has his own design aesthetic, and this, I think him changing the silhouette slightly is him doing something insane for him. So that's why I was saying I don't think it's fair to compare him to someone like Charles Jeffrey, who obviously is doing something completely different.
Yeah.
But I do think for me, I think comparing him to, I think he kind of revolutionized this idea of the skinny suit and this idea of a very different silhouette. And I wish I saw something that was like, what is that in 2019? And I think I don't really, I agree, but I think I wanted just something just a tiny bit more or just slightly different. Because I do see the subtle changes, and I see the attention to the detail on the jackets and how the hem of the pants and the length of the pants are different. But
the
I kind
length
of wish
of the
it was,
jackets as well. It's a revolution for Hedi. That everybody now is done. So his jackets are becoming a little bit longer, a little bit, fitting. So, and two things I noticed that are different from most of the others. Not a single pair of trainer inside, and not a girl on the catwalk.
Which is
I mean,
really
everybody
weird,
is
right?
doing...
It's so weird because his last show was the women's wear show, and he had androgynous looks on the catwalk, which I think for all intents and purposes you can say were menswear looks, but no women's wear in this collection, or not even no androgynous looks that a woman could wear. Although having said that, I do quite like some of their clothes, and maybe they would suit a woman as well.
I think something that you miss looking at something on the runway also is the construction of it. Like I almost wish I could pick up one of his coats just to see how it's been finished on the inside, because I think...
And none of his clothes are in store at the moment.
I also have to say, yeah, they're going to be now in a month, but I also have to say that I don't know if we have the video here. We don't have the video to show. It's so much better when you look at it in movement. This morning I watched the video. The video is on the Celine website. And, you know, with the music and, you know, they're stomping down very fast rhythm, that's very Hedi Slimane. And I watched the photos first, and then I watched the video, and I was like, whoa, I liked it so much more. And actually, clothes will be seen in movement in the street. So, and that's where I saw a different kind of take to luxury. And before, when I was talking about the music, one thing I forgot to say, which is what I wanted to say, is that he said, I wanted to put the classic musician from the 70s that I've always admired to the new band and put them together. And I don't know, it seems like maybe banal, but try to tell you that I think that's something from the past that is coming back in a modernized way. And when I was watching it with the music, I'm like, I get this. But you seem so underwhelmed, except from Ruth.
Yeah. There's one thing that I wanted to bring up too, because you kind of touched on it, is that I think the casting is something really that I think should be talked about.
I wanted to talk about the casting,
Because that was something that was the first thing that really stuck out to me, is I really think that...
Considering there was criticism last season, with the last show, surely they would just rectify it, because it's easily rectifiable, and there's so many fantastic models of colour, and I'm like, why do they not just include? There was like 66 looks, and only, I think it's 4 or 5 models or models of colour, and then there's also not representation of really any other ethnicity.
For me, it's more body than race.
It's to do with body, but I just think...
Hold on. Many others, and I don't want to quote them here, but I'm not trying to defend Hedi, please bear with me, but many others didn't have more than 4 or 5 people of color, but it wasn't addressed. Hold on. But it wasn't addressed. When Hedi does that, that's all people see. I don't agree with his looks, only skinny, only this, but that's who he is. People, he will not change that.
But I don't think it's a sustainable brand to say that's who he is. Because I think that, especially now, I think since...
I agree.
I think in 2019...
I agree, and yet it sells. Yeah. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a reflection...
Do you know what I mean? Does it sell
to all together. I don't think it's a reflection of society, but the guy sells. So what does that mean?
But I think as someone who is such a titan in the fashion industry, as much as we're all sitting here kind of critiquing him, I think that we do have responsibility as people who put things out creatively.
Couldn't agree more.
And especially as something that's creative that people live their lives in, because we're really creating stuff that people eventually wear on a daily basis. I think it's really important for big brands and for big designers to be showing a diverse cast, to be showing something that's interesting, that's modern, that is 2019, and I don't think this is 2019.
I think casting,
yeah.
I think casting has been a big deal this year, not just in fashion, but also in film. I mean, there's been so much conversation around casting of, for example, like Asian actresses and actors, and just representation on film and what that means for the people that are watching it. And so I think when he casts like a very specific certain type of person, fine, he can say, this is my muse, this is the person that I'm
look like
casting
him.
for. Yeah. But then he's narrowing the people that really the collection speaks to, I think. And maybe that's partially why I don't feel moved by this, is that I look at the casting and I'm like, I don't see anything remotely close to anything that...
For me, it's especially the skinniness. It's like, if you're not tall and skinny, you cannot wear what I design. And that's probably the thing that disturbs me the most. But it is true. I mean, it's still very white. It's very red hair. Did you notice? He has something for ginger hair at this season. Still very white. It's very English.
I don't know, and I just think, I even think personally, I think, because he spends so much attention now that we're looking at it in motion, there is a real attention to detail about the sets and the vibe and kind of where you are when you're watching it. So I just think maybe if he fully had gone into just a real kind of rock and roll character that wasn't just this kind of skinny, white, British looking person.
I don't think he can. You know, I don't think he can, and I hate saying this, but he's 50. He comes from a generation where that didn't matter, which is wrong. I'm not justifying it, defending it. I don't think he can. I think we cannot expect from Hedy to do body diversity, race diversity. He will not.
But do you think it's so much that it's not that he can, but that he's afraid to try something different?
What do you mean by he's afraid?
I mean, I feel like it's a risk, you know, and when you have a lot on the line for selling a certain type of look, I mean, I think partially part of the reason why he was chosen to be part of this brand is that there's some predictability in what he does, and he doesn't really he doesn't deviate from what his vision is of what he does, and so.
But I just don't understand why racial diversity has to come into his vision. Like, he should be able to cast a wide range of models like that. I don't feel like that would disturb his vision, and I really struggle to see how you could argue that it would disturb his vision if he was more inclusive with his casting.
There's really no way to argue it. In 2019, I feel like most brands should just be diverse, and that should just be the grade standard.
It shouldn't even be a
discussion.
Be a question.
No, it shouldn't be a discussion.
It
should just be that is
especially
because it was written. Apparently, he made the collection in London. You know, like Phoebe did.
Street cast.
Yeah. So surely, if he was spending a lot of time, London is one of the most diverse cities in the world. So surely, he would like if he was getting inspiration from that, he would have seen what a diverse society we are, and would have wanted to cast that. And it would have taken one note in the notes to the casting team to ask.
I'm very interested in what you're saying, and I'm asking you this precisely because he said, you know, I not moved back, but I came a lot to London in the spring, and I started my street casting there and my inspiration. But
where is he?
It looks like 1960s swinging London down King's Road. If you go down King's Road now, as you said, it doesn't look like this. So, and are you a Londoner?
Yeah.
So, does that exist in London?
I think it's so diverse in London. I just don't understand.
No, but does that, what we're looking at, exist?
Yeah, but I think that does exist, but so does so much more exist. And I think that either he's had a very marginalised view on what he's been seeing every time he leaves his house, or whether, I don't know, or whether he just is very obstinate in the aesthetic that he wants. But then, like going back to what we were saying, does that make him relevant in 2019, or does that make him relevant 10 years ago? Because a lot of newer brands are organically diverse, and it doesn't even have to come up in conversation. So surely, for us to have to point it out that it's not diverse enough, does that not make a considerable point for the fact that this is maybe not as forward-thinking as it could be? Oh,
yeah. That's very well said. I don't think it's forward-thinking. I think it's heady thinking. That's the difference. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm surprised that people expect something different.
I expect, because did you not think that the Celine customer obviously was a woman, but there would have been men that would have been buying those Celine pieces and wearing them anyway. And I think that customer, and even the women's wear, are perhaps going into different brands now, like JW, or dare I say it, Vicky B, because they are producing those silhouettes that Celine was producing for 10 years.
Yeah.
They're obviously slightly different, but I mean, there were some skirts from Celine that are identical to JW now, almost identical. And it would have made so much sense to make a menswear that was like that. Do you know what I mean? Light in colour, light in texture, and light fabric. So it had more movement to it, rather than create this really restricting, sleek silhouette, which is beautiful and works fantastically for Heidi, but I just don't think it's Celine at all, because there was so much potential for the menswear.
I actually really disagree though. I feel like the cuts that he's doing for men, especially with the more relaxed pant and the slightly bigger, boxier jackets, are taking inspiration from Phoebe Philo's Celine.
They're only slightly baggy though, aren't they?
I think it's more Celine than the women's wear that he did.
Yeah, that's a great, that is.
This is much more proven. But also, if you hire Hedy Slimane, I mean, let's go back to Phoebe. One thing, Phoebe, of course, for me, she was one of the most innovative people, not in the strange material, whatever, but she gave women a different way of being chic. And I salute her, and I will always love her for this. But the thing that was clear when Phoebe came on board of Celine is that she didn't go into any archives. I mean, there was not really a Celine woman, and she did it her way, and Celine is Phoebe Philo, or it was Phoebe Philo. When LVMH hired Hedy, they expected him to do the same thing, and he did.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was reading before his first show, to expect that he would do something remotely Phoebe Philo-ish was naive. And he didn't, and maybe went a little bit too far. No, I didn't like his women's collection. I think he's a much better men's designer. But I would never expect, I think what he wants is that Celine is Hedi Slimane.
But there was an archive before Phoebe Philo with Michael Kors, which we were talking a little bit about before the show. And she basically was like, clean slate, let's start again. I know there was a huge reaction online when Celine wiped their Instagram of all Phoebe Philo just before Hedi Slimane joined. And I thought that was a little bit...
The logo change.
Interesting.
Interesting, it's a very good way to
Saint Laurent also did the same thing of wiping all of the history when Anthony Vaccarello joined. So all of Hedi Slimane stuff disappeared from Instagram, from the Saint Laurent.
Both
Instagram.
ways he went back to the original logo. Yves Saint Laurent and Celine without an apostrophe.
But there's been like so many logo changes this season. Like Beluti changed their logo. People aren't, getting offended by that.
The logo changes is the new I'm bringing in my vision more than the fashion, actually. Can we talk about that? It's like I changed the logo, I brought in my vision.
Because it's done for the digital market, isn't it? It's so I read that it's so that it's visible, easily recognizable online, and that's so sad because it flattens absolutely everything, or any sort of character that a brand had to line on a digital screen. Do you know what I mean? Where there were some really nice logos that were identifiable. Even the Burberry one beforehand, the Burberry one had heritage, and it was so nice. And now, not that I don't like the new one, but it's just so standardized.
Although I read a really interesting article on the fashion law, which talks a bit about like fashion and law interaction. And they were saying one of the reasons that a lot of brands could be doing this is because of copyright, is that if you have a logo which has a lot of distinctive features, it's a lot harder to prove that someone has like copyrighted it, because then instead of doing like a very exact copy of that font, if they do it slightly differently, they can argue it's like not an exact copy. Whereas here, it's like the more basic the logo is, the easier it is to prove copyright if someone like makes a knockoff of your product.
But I'm sure that it also is stylistic, for sure, because I think this choice was definitely, this is a new era, this is me, this is not Phoebe Philo. And I do have to say, going back to what you were saying, I do think that some people are unfair of kind of expecting him to do exactly what Phoebe Philo did. I am underwhelmed with this, but I'm underwhelmed with this in the context of I'd like him to be doing more of him. I'd like to see the new him, because comparing this to Saint Laurent or Dior, I think it's very similar to what he was doing. And I kind of just want something that's just, what is it in Celine that he sees that this is different? And I think that's what I'm not getting at. I think
Starting from the casting.
Yeah. And I think it just all seems like we're kind of in this time warp of it's not exactly, I don't know, it's just not fresh to me.
So in a way we're expecting for Hedi, since we have respect of Hedi as a designer, to bring fashion forward, and we're not seeing this. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Well, I think he has changed or presented a different silhouette to what other designers have presented this fashion week, and it's different to what he's been doing before. But on the whole, I can see, like on a first glance, it does look quite similar. There's a lot of like bomber jackets, leather jackets, and that kind of thing, which he's done in previous seasons. But I feel like it's the tailoring that's really different this season, and new as well, just like overall.
There is this tendency, and again, I'd like to understand also for young people, does it matter for you? Is it relevant to what you want to wear? But there is this tendency that John started at his artisanal show, at his last men's show, to go into couture for men. And Kim just did it for Dior, and he went into the women's couture archives, and he added some of the cuts and of the, and I think he did it beautifully. So there is this tendency to go back to classic, skilled tailoring for men, which is the new trend, and probably it's a reaction from the streetswear, the sportswear, the sneakers everywhere, whatever. What do you guys think about that, men and women? Does it matter for your generation? Or as fashion designer or fashion enthusiast?
I think for me as a designer, craftsmanship has always been something that I think is to the core of what we create, because, especially in this world of like fast fashion, I think it's almost a pushback, like gut instinct reaction to push that away and make something that's been beautifully made. And especially in this climate where we're talking a lot about sustainability and how do we create garments that will last for generations versus something that someone will just buy and throw away?
Yeah.
I think in that context, that's why it's so important to make things beautifully and have them well made. And that for me is tying into that idea of sustainability.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I agree. I mean, the one thing, like how you said, I liked how I did not see a trainer on the runway, and I don't like, I like that I didn't see hoodies and joggers. I like that there was kind of an attention to real menswear, which I think could be considered reactionary, as there might be too much of that in the marketplace right now, which I think is kind of on the way out. So I do appreciate that in a lot of ways, that we're looking at kind of like classic tailoring, classic menswear as kind of bringing that back into something. I do think that there's ways to push that maybe beyond, and I think with menswear, I think you see, especially with a brand maybe like Gucci, perhaps, I think it kind of verges now, or even Charles Jeffrey Young brands, they're verging on kind of mixing into more feminine spheres, mixing into kind of an androgynous look.
Androgynous,
And I don't think that that has gone here in this collection, and I think that
It's
might
very
be,
masculine, you think?
It's very masculine.
Really?
I think so. Yeah. And I think that that is where I see kind of more that kind of couture push of menswear.
I would definitely wear this look entirely.
Yeah.
That doesn't, yeah. It's still not, because androgynous is like it's an honest fusion of men's and women. It's not just cross-fertilization. I don't think, this is very, personally, I think it's very like atypical menswear. It's still going to get reported as androgynous, but it's not, I still don't think, I think there are some, I think it's great that it's like really nice tailored pieces. I think they look really well made and they will shoot really nicely. And I love, I don't think that athleisure has a place on, I think athleisure has a place, but I don't think it has a place on the runway necessarily.
Really, that's interesting, really?
Just because it's a whole different sphere, but it seems to, and it's a lower market sphere just based on the fabrics and how it's made. In general, obviously there are brands that do much more high-end pieces, so I just think that that has a place, but it's more of a, everyone's just doing it because it's accessible, isn't it? It's to get people interested in a really confused market. But I don't know, I like that it's tailored, but I just think there are other brands that are doing more exciting things, like Paloma Spain are doing so many amazing nicely tailored menswear pieces that are interesting, and they might not be for everyone, but they know their customer and it's new. Whereas this is
Can't compare the figures though, unfortunately.
Yeah, but whereas this is nice and it will probably get shot everywhere, but it's...
Well, let's take this look. I don't know if the people are seeing it, but if you take away the bowl haircut and the attitude and the skinny tie, it could. Does it shout Hedi Slimane? Does it? Do you know where it comes from?
I think if Celine is all about like relaxed, easy to wear tailoring that's like comfortable to wear, I think the pants could be a new Celine staple. And I feel like that fits within the brand. There's another look later in the collection where the model is wearing like this velvet blazer underneath a coat, and the way that it's tucked in and the way that it's sort of cinched together is really feminine, I think. It's like right towards the end.
Yeah, I disagree on the fact that there's nothing that could be worn by a woman here. There's so much I would
Oh, I think that's sure. I think it could be
wear, and probably the trousers, high-waisted, short hems, they're more masculine than some of the jackets, and especially the knitwear in the shirts. They're all
It can be worn by a woman, but vice versa. Everything that's women's wear can probably be worn by a man. It's just by choice, but I don't think it's not really like the actual design to it is not really a cross-fertilization of masculine and feminine features.
And the references for the designs, I don't think, come from something that would be traditionally feminine or traditionally used.
But this could be a woman model. I think it is.
Yeah, it could be.
It's just not big. There's no skirts and dresses on men, but I don't think that's androgynous at all. That's a men's skirt.
Yeah, putting menswear on a woman and women's wear on a man doesn't make it androgynous. It just makes it's essentially cross-dressing, isn't it? But androgynous is
this for me.
Is that true? I would say.
For me, androgynous is these people that you don't know exactly if they're a man or a woman. There is a lot of feminine in a man and a lot of masculine in a woman, and they dress the same. For me, that's androgynous, as you said. Otherwise, it's a dress on a man. What do you think? You're nodding, so you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, I think the clothing changes depending on who's wearing it, really. And so maybe it's harder for us to imagine because he sent men down the runway, but it could have just as easily been a woman wearing these clothing, I think.
One thing that really stuck out to me is I think that, and I'm interested to see after a couple more collections, but there's a really limited color palette for me in the clothes, and it does also really reflect his first show and his previous work. And I kind of, that's something that I think maybe is a missed opportunity too, is kind of just taking it into a different sphere, color, textile-wise. I think it's very limited, and I thought that was kind of an interesting choice as well.
I have to say, I don't expect him to move beyond blacks and greys.
I don't either.
But there's a lot of yellow here, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some yellow, which is quite stunning. Can we see his first show for Celine and see the menswear in that show, and there we will see the difference. We'll see not the difference, but some sort of evolution in the...
He had the skinny tie here as well.
The haircut is there already.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually.
It's very similar.
And the eyewear.
Very similar,
Very
yeah.
similar.
You're right. Well, can we talk a little bit about, so I would like to hear from all of you what, in this men's season, what really excited you and why, and what you as fashion students would want to do or would want to see done. So what did excite you and why, first of all?
I think London was the most exciting, just as a general season. Milan, I wasn't massively impressed by anything. But I think in London, what I really liked was that there was a much softer side to the menswear. So there was a lot more of like softer fabrics, pushing things in maybe a slightly more feminine direction, not so much that it was like inaccessible. But I felt that in Milan, and especially in Paris, there was this real like aggression to the menswear that was being shown. There was lots of like military wear. There was lots of like boys going out to fight kind of thing. Like even in the RAF show, there was like these hats which were like the sort of hats you'd wear in the trenches. And as much as I loved like the Dior show, they came out on like a conveyor belt, almost like they've just come out of a production line that's just been producing soldiers or something, which was kind of uncomfortable almost. Yeah. But yeah, I think I liked London a lot more because I thought the shows were much softer, much more kind to men, I guess.
I mean, maybe I'm biased because we all study here in London and we feel so close to sort of the heart of like London design here. But I said a little bit of it before, but I think London for me as well was very compelling because I just felt like the designers had something to say with their clothing, and they were aspiring to really bring more of a vision to the audience of what they felt the future was or what they felt that their clothes should represent. Because I think, again, fashion, when it's elevated, it's telling a story, and I think the consumer, when they buy a piece from that collection, they almost feel as if they're buying a piece of that vision and buying into that story. And I think that's the beautiful thing about fashion. It's not just the clothing, it's about the message and what the potential is, and kind of taking into context political, other social things that are happening around us, and being able to kind of reflect on that and bring that into clothing, and I think people buy into that.
I think for me, I mean, obviously I love the Craig Green show. I thought it was beautiful, like from a kind of shock factor, kind of entering into his world, you really get it. But I think also if we're looking at other big kind of titans, which I think we might want to look at against Celine, because Celine is such a big brand, is I think if you look at someone like Prada, I really, really enjoyed the Prada show. I thought that was interesting and new, while still kind of having a real kind of pull into traditional menswear, and I thought that was kind of very sensitively done. It was very new. I think that's kind of the direction that it's moving towards, menswear. And I think that Loewe and Dior did that as well. I think it was kind of a softer side to menswear while still kind of...
Some vulnerability.
Yeah, which I really liked.
Yeah. Josh?
Yeah, I was going to say Loewe. Loewe was a standout for me. Absolutely gorgeous.
Really great.
Because they were like chap boots, weren't they? That were like undone.
Yeah.
They're absolutely stunning, and obviously JW piles on like more is more, less is more. So it's perfect for like in terms of styling. That will get shot everywhere, and rightly so because it looks gorgeous. I did think Craig Green was really good. That was really strong for London, but I just don't think. I think there are a lot of people. There's less people showing, but there's still a lot of people showing on the menswear schedule. But it's a lot of like
There's fewer in Milan, but they all went to Paris. Paris was very, very dense.
But there's not really. There's not really anything, well, not, I mean, obviously, we're still students, so what does my opinion really matter? But
No,
it's like...
It does. You are the customer as well.
There's nothing really majorly exciting, because if you look at magazines and things like that, all the editorials are either, they're so contrived and it's all of the same, and half of the magazines now, you don't really get an honest representation of anything new, because all the editorials are bought by brands. So like you look in Wonderland magazine and there'll be like whole editorial made by, it will be Celine or something like that, or Saint Laurent, and they will have bought like 20 pages and make it, and so to the honest buyer, they will think that, oh, that's amazing, they will think that's a trend and that's something that's happening, but really it's all contrived and it's all been bought. So we won't get an honest representation of what's new, and the cyclical process will continue. But I think, yeah, Craig Green, Loewe, they were grand standouts, but that's because they produced, I think, something that was different to all of the other menswear designers, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, my favorite were, I agree with you, Craig Green in London and Charles as well. And,
yeah, Charles was good, but Charles was good too.
Dior in Paris and Prada in Milan. So in a way, apart from Miuccia, we're talking about English designers, no matter where. And it's, I think you're right about the creativity that London allows in a way, maybe because it's not that commercial, but then the problem is, are these successful, you know, commercially or whatever? But I think Paris was very political as well. I don't think they forgot the world we're living in, but it was more dystopian, more aggressive, more we have to react, or we have to move to a different planet, or we have to do something. While in London, it was okay, we're in trouble, especially here, and let's have fun, let's be happy, let's, you know, go over it, let's be vulnerable, let's be scared, let's be, and I thought it was very sexy. So yeah, well, I guess we have to end it here. It was a great panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, I need to thank Cartel for, again, letting us sit on their beautiful furniture that I know you can't really see, but it's here and it's floating in the air. And again, this show we're sitting in is 100 Women. It's still on at SHOWstudio until the end of the month. And every artwork, it's unique, it's one of a kind, and you can buy it on the new SHOWstudio shop online. Bye-bye.